Sometimes, I'm sure you'll find this hard to believe, sometimes even I will sometimes use great church songs even though I think they have bad theology. Well, I got a couple of snickers out of that. Given that auspicious introduction, anyone care to guess as to what bad theology I'm referencing in one or more of our songs today? Boy, we're all quiet. Okay, I'll tell you. The first thing that comes to my mind is the images of battle. Now, I absolutely love our first hymn. I keep requesting it. We have to borrow it from the United Methodist hymnal. Thank you, United Methodists. And I love the transition from the more somber verses to the energized chorus. But you know, the chorus also has language about triumph and victory that can be construed as conquering, military-like. Depending on one's perspective, this could be interpreted as fighting language. Then triumphant and triumph appear again in each of our next two hymns, underscoring the same perspective concern. But let us not continue to mince words. During communion, look in your bulletin, we will sing about battle, strife, triumph, and victory. But, my friends, when we want to be or feel combative, let us remember the actions and words of Jesus. Even though many Christians think so, I do not believe Jesus was ever combative. In his discourses with multiple authorities, strong language, yes. Combative, no. For example, the Greek word ekbalo is typically translated into English as drove, although it really means to cast out or to drive out. The degree of force used is up to one's interpretation or perspective. So thinking about that, did you know that the same Greek word is used for both the Spirit, ekbalos, the Spirit driving Jesus into the wilderness, and Jesus driving the animals and maybe people out of the temple during Holy Week? I think the force in these stories is more like an Australian shepherd dog that nips at the heels. I know this experience personally because my son has one of those dogs. But it's even more fun to watch Tenzing shepherd my wife. I like to think my perspective on this is backed up in our reading on Good Friday, where we had the passion story from the Gospel of John, and Jesus says in verse 36, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom belonged to this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Yet we live in a world where so many Christians believe we are in a fight for our souls and the world. Why? Have we Christians made the same assumption that the Israelites did? God, Jesus, the Messiah, is all about being a triumphant and victorious, winning conqueror over the evil in this world. I believe the biblical record is clear. That is not how or what Jesus as the Messiah was 2,000 years ago. And I do not believe that it is what God, Jesus, are about now, today, either. Is it possible for us to learn what the Israelites did not? God, I hope and pray so. The second thing of importance on this day, especially considering our readings today and for this week, is not to blame the Israelites, the Jews. Societies are always fractured. The degrees or depths of divide are constantly changing, as are the reasons for various divides. This was true in first century Rome and Palestine, just as it is in the 21st century America. Assigning blame to all Jews for the actions of some Jews is like blaming all Americans for the actions of some Americans. What is important here is the activity and plan of God carried out by Jesus as the living and dying and living again sign of God's grace, love, and mercy. How different our world would be if we could but live and love as Jesus lived and expected and taught us to live as well, caring for each other as we care for ourselves. Martin Luther, in his large and small catechisms, takes each of what we call the Ten Commandments and enlarges the intent of each of these sayings. For example, this is my favorite, I use it all the time. Do not kill does not simply mean do not kill. For Martin Luther, it is our responsibility to provide for others that which can prevent their demise. To provide food for the hungry so that they do not starve to death. To provide clothing and housing for the unclothed and unhoused so that they do not die from exposure to the elements. This same concept applies to this modern world of ours, to basic essential health care. Finally, the third point is, did you happen to notice who was at the tomb? Ah, the women. Yeah. I saw a post this morning. If it weren't for the women evangelists, we wouldn't have Christianity today because the men have been still locked in a room. And that's getting ahead of my sermon. First question, where were the men? I just gave you the answer. Locked in a room. Yeah. Okay, skip a page. Men tend to be macho, and women tend to be fearless. Well, maybe not about bugs. But we do know that macho and fearless are not the same. Women tend also to be more pure, less corrupted by our societies. I think this is because women are closer to children, and children are truly pure until we adults corrupt them. Now, women at the tomb first is, I think, very important. But the most important thing at the tomb that morning and every morning was that God, Jesus, was alive again. Now, if you think in terms of the Trinity, the inseparable yet diverse parts of God, then this biblical story is really about God coming to be with and live like us, and then dying like us in a horrible way. But God's story, and ours, by the way, does not end there, because God reaches deep into the tomb and death and brings God's self back to life again, just like God will do for us if we just believe God can and will do that. Do you believe that? Do you know that all creation tells this story over and over? Good timing. I saw this picture on Facebook from the Reverend Dr. Mark Sandlin. It says the story of the resurrection is that creation is wired for new beginnings. The story of the resurrection is that fear and hate and grief do not win the day. Love does. The story of seeds, leaves and trees, sun and moon and stars, the beautiful green on the Poly hillside, is that creation renews daily. That rebirth and renewal are not only God's plan, but also God's design. Have no fear, little ones, because God holds you in God's hands. Hear then the good news. God, Jesus, are risen. Believe it. God is continually seeking to make us children of God, heirs of the kingdom. You are God's. Jesus is risen. We will rise again. It is God's design, God's plan. Grace and peace to you, my friends, this week. Do not be afraid. Believe in the resurrection, and then offer resurrection daily to those around you. Amen.